of Prabhupada leaving India for the first time and going to the West to attempt to spread Krishna consciousness. We also were here earlier in the year for the 40th anniversary of the opening of this temple. In May we had the 40th anniversary of the opening of the Melbourne temple. So there's a lot of, special occasions coming up. I don't think that when we first joined we could think in terms of 40 years or 50 years in the future. I remember somebody telling me just after I'd first joined in Sydney, I was asking about how long does it take to perfect your chanting, and somebody had apparently asked Srila Prabhupada that, and Prabhupada had replied 30 years for himself. And I was thinking at the time, 30 years, that's inconceivable. So now here we are. So time goes on, but the transcendental principle remains the same. At the Melbourne opening, the celebration anyway, I told a little story. I'll start off this session with the same story. Those of you that heard it there, don't mind. But in December of 1976, Prabhupada had gone down to Hyderabad. We spent a couple of weeks on the farm there. When we left, actually, we got in the car just outside the gate there. As Prabhupada got in the car, he said, now we're going to start a new phase of this movement. And then Jagadish was the secretary. He asked Srila Prabhupada, what is that, Srila Prabhupada? And Prabhupada said, Varnashram. So that was his idea, that we had this 560 acres that had been given to us in Hyderabad, and Prabhupada was going there to inaugurate a Varnashram system. It's a simple idea, simple system, but he was very keen for it. Anyway, when we got down there, we had a few days in the city temple. Mahamsa was in charge at that time. Whenever Prabhupada asked for him, they said, oh, he's at the farm. After 4 or 5 days, Prabhupada got fed up of sitting in the city because he'd actually gone down there to stay on the farm. So he ordered them, now I'm coming. So they had a small house that they were constructing, but it wasn't quite ready. So they cleared out some simple rooms. There was a row of 4 rooms, brick with a tin sheeting on the roof. And they gave one of those rooms to Srila Prabhupada. So he moved in, he was quite happy. He said, actually, although I was born in the city, he said, I like this life, living in the country, simple. So one evening, some guests came, and one of them gave a framed picture of the deities to Srila Prabhupada. So when you came in the room, the roof was like 2 or 3 feet higher than the door jamb, but it sloped to the back. So where it hit the wall at the back, it was only about 6 feet. So there was a metal cabinet, an almirah, like that one there in the corner. And it was against the back wall. There was a little bit of a gap between the almirah and the roof. So Prabhupada gave me the photo, or the frame. He said, now put this on top of the almirah. So I went over and I was trying to get it in this way and that way. I couldn't figure out how to do it. It just wouldn't fit. And Prabhupada was watching me. So then he got up and he came over. He took the frame off me and he just went, whoop. And that was it. It was in. It was like instant. And everybody, it was so, the contrast, me struggling for a minute or two and then Prabhupada just coming over and just, and I think I may have even told him that it doesn't seem to fit Srila Prabhupada, and he just plunked it straight in there. So everybody was laughing. And Prabhupada said, everything requires a little intelligence. And he sat down, he said, you know the story about Columbus and friends? So I said, no, Srila Prabhupada, because I hadn't heard it, but we were very eager to hear it, and I was hoping Prabhupada would tell us, so he obliged. So he said one time Columbus and friends, they were sitting and his friends were telling him, actually what you did was no big deal. Anybody could have done it. The land was there, the ships were there, you just got on the boat, you sailed across the ocean and you bumped into America. So he was arguing, no, it actually takes some intelligence. So they wouldn't accept. So he said, I'll prove it. So then he got a chicken's egg. So he said, now, any one of you, make this egg stand on its end on the table. So each one of them were trying, the egg was rolling this way and that way. Nobody could do it. So then Columbus took the egg. He said, now I'll show you. So when he got the egg, he went bang, and he crushed the shell on the end and stood the egg up on the table. So then they all said, oh, anybody could have done that. And he said, so he said, no, he said, the table was there, the egg was there. You couldn't do it, but I did. Therefore, it took some intelligence to find America. Anyway, the point about the story is that Srila Prabhupada, in going to America, America was there, the boats were there. I mean, you know, you could have flown also if you'd have had the means. But in going to America, it's not like Prabhupada was given that instruction exclusively. Anybody actually was invited to do it. That was the point. And in fact, the attempt was made in the 1930s with Bon Maharaj and Bhakti Pradeep Tirtha Maharaj and Sambhadananda. They went and spent several years in London, and then they went to Europe, they went to Germany. But somehow or another, there was no fruit from that. Nothing happened. And in fact, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, although he had great hopes and expectations, he became quite disgusted by their attempt, or disgusted or disappointed. But he called them back, at least anyway. He was sending them 700 rupees a month, which in those days was a huge amount of money, 1930s, just to support their preaching, but they couldn't get anything established. No new devotees were made practically. And after some time, he became disgusted or disappointed. He called them back, and nothing happened, or apparently nothing happened. And although the expectation was very high, and I haven't seen this myself, but I was told that in the Harmonist, which was the English language monthly periodical, just even establishing the Harmonist itself was significant, because that had been previously the Sajantoshini, which was a Bengali language periodical. Bhaktivinoda Thakur had started publishing that. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had continued with that. But in 1927, the Sajantoshini became the Harmonist, and it became an English publication. It was published every month for 10, 11 years after that. So the expectation, it was mentioned there in the Harmonist, that very shortly some devotees will be sent to the West and Krishna consciousness would begin to be spread all around the world. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had let it be known that if they were successful in their effort, then he personally was going to leave India, he would live in England, and from there he would go to other places like America. So there was a lot of, let's say, buzz, if you like. It was in the atmosphere. You know, from the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur in 1896, year of Prabhupada's birth, sending that small booklet in English to all the major universities in the world. We found one in Sydney. I think they got one in Germany. There was the other one in McGill University in Canada. So there was this increasing expectation that Krishna consciousness was about to become an international religion or spiritual principle. But nothing happened. Somehow or another, there was a disappointment there. And so, of course, we know Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati left the planet in 1937. But the point here is that I'm making is that there was an open invitation for anybody to do it. Anybody could have done it. But only one person actually did it, and that was Srila Prabhupada. So there were some indicators, of course. Bhaktivinoda Thakur had said that very shortly some personality would appear who would take the holy name all around the world. People from Germany and France and America and Russia would come. and they would chant Jai Sachinandan in Mayapur. So that was all there. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was gearing up himself, for this attempt. But somehow or another, it didn't fructify until Srila Prabhupada came along. So in 1922, of course, we know that the very first instruction that Prabhupada got from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, even before he considered himself to be a disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta, he was told to preach the message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the English language. Of course, he didn't do anything immediately, but the impression was created from that first meeting that he felt in his heart that this person actually is my guru, that he's fit to lead this Krishna consciousness movement. Now the glories of Lord Chaitanya will be spread. So he was confident in that. It was a growing conviction. Prabhupada said that he always had a sublime interest in his spiritual master's instruction. So then in 1933, Prabhupada was initiated. In 1935, he had been down in Bombay. The Gaudiya Math devotees, they had decided to open a temple in Bombay. Prabhupada was there doing business, and so he helped them. And he was very competent. He was very expert in whatever he did. He introduced them to some wealthy business contacts that he had. They got some land. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati went there himself in early 1935, and they called most of the leaders of the Gaudiya Math there. So at that time, one or two of the devotees that had been there in Bombay made a recommendation to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati that Abhay Babu, although he's a Grihasta and he's a fairly new man, he'd only been initiated a couple of years at that point, that he should be the temple president because he was so expert at whatever he did. He was a good manager, he was an enthusiastic preacher, like that. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati made this comment that actually, no, he should not be the temple president. And in fact, he said he's better off outside of your company. Yeah, he said that in the future, he himself will do everything. He does not require anybody else's help. So that was reported back to Srila Prabhupada. And he told me, he said, when I heard that Guru Maharaj had said that, he said, I couldn't understand it. He said, I was thinking, I alone will do everything? How is that? He couldn't imagine how it could be possible. But that means that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had earmarked him. And then later in the same year, in 1935, he came here for Kartik, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, that's 35 to 2015, what's that? 90 years? 80 years, exactly 80 years ago. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was there preaching in Radhakund, and Prabhupada took some time off, and he spent the most extended time that he'd had with his spiritual master, about 10 or 12 days in Radhakund, and he received so many instructions there, and so many intimate things were said as well. Agun Dvalbe, this Gaudiya Math will burn in a blazing fire. If you ever get money, print books. So many instructions were given. And the exchanges were very intimate. So at one point, one of the leading sannyasis, he took Prabhupada aside and he told him that fools rush in where angels fear to tread. In other words, we're the big leaders. Even we don't get so close to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So you're a new man, you're a Grihasta, a Kacha Grihasta, as they used to say, and the Gaudiya Math, rotten Grihasta. So he was warning him, you're getting too familiar. This is very dangerous for you. So Prabhupada told us, he said, when he said that, I thought, well, fool I may be, but that's my relationship. So he didn't care for that. He had a natural relationship with his spiritual master, which was envied by other disciples. So Prabhupada was telling us this story about the visit to Radhakund. in 1977, myself and Abhiram. We were in his room in Calcutta, and Prabhupada was recounting these statements by his Guru Maharaj. And so Abhiram asked Srila Prabhupada, he said, did your spiritual master know that you would go on to do what you have now done? This is 1977. And Prabhupada said, yes. So, there's something special was going on there for sure. But at the same time, the general effort, the general mood of the Gaudiya Math devotees had been, that Krishna consciousness was just about to break all over the world. But nobody did it. Yeah, the same facility was there. The books, the philosophy was there. The structure of the Gaudiya Math, as it had been set up for preaching, was there. So, all the facilities were available, but nobody could utilize them at all until Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada's effort, or Prabhupada's instruction was not exclusive to him, that he should preach in the English language, but it was particular to Srila Prabhupada. It was open to everybody, but it was particularly given to Srila Prabhupada. No, I can't have it too close. It's all right. I'm sorry, but I have to. All right. Mother Parvati is my ruler, so I have to do what she says. It was not exclusive to Prabhupada, but it was very particular to Srila Prabhupada, and he took it very, very seriously. And of course, we see the end result now, 50 years later, from Prabhupada leaving, to go to America. And there's a nice comment that Prabhupada makes in the class that he gave this morning. We heard for Srimad Bhagavatam class. That verse stresses that the association of devotees is the all-important factor in a person developing transcendental love of Godhead. And Prabhupada's there's an interesting little comment that Prabhupada makes here. I'll just see if I can find it. Okay, by associating with pure devotees and by hearing them submissively, attachment for the material enjoyment becomes slackened, and attraction for hearing about the transcendental activities of the Lord becomes prominent. Once they will go on progressively without stoppage, like fire in gunpowder. I love that expression. There's a lot more that Prabhupada says there, but like fire in gunpowder. And that's what we see happened when Prabhupada arrived in America. It was fire in gunpowder, instant reaction, and widespread damage to the material energy. And Prabhupada created this army, of Lord Chaitanya's devotees for spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world, and it was miraculous. Mukunda Maharaj, he called his book Miracle on Second Avenue. Yeah, and that's what it was. It was a miraculous event. You got people now. Shyama Sundar Prabhu is just about to release finally his book, 2 books actually, 2 volumes. And if you look at what happened to them, Malati just sent a little message to Mukunda Maharaj because he's just had like a triple heart bypass and a broken hip, and he's still in the hospital at the moment, but he is recovering, or he's improving at least. So Malati just wrote a little letter to him where she recounted how they met with him, and then through him they met Srila Prabhupada. So Malati and Shyama Sundar were up in Oregon or someplace in the middle of a huge forest, living in a watchtower. And they were kind of like in exile, if you like, from normal material life. Mukunda came over after having met Srila Prabhupada in New York, and when he drove over, he decided to go and see his old friends. Just after 1 day or 2 days, it started to snow, so that was the end of their job there at the forestry. They had to get out. And they had some plans, but then Mukunda told them, no, you should just meet the Swami and help me establish a temple. And they asked him, well, what's a temple? And he said, well, it's like a storefront. You paint it white, and it becomes a temple. And so they said, okay, sure. So they jumped in the car and drove down, and that was it. Prabhupada arrived very shortly afterwards. As soon as they saw him, their entire lives were completely turned upside down. Literally, it's like magic. They just gave up everything that they had, all of their previous connections, all of their family and friends, and just walked away from it, everything that they'd known in their whole lives, and took up with Srila Prabhupada. And same with, Brahmananda, Gagamuni, Hayagriva, Kirtanananda, and all the rest of them, Satsvarup. Just a few moments of association with Srila Prabhupada, and that was it. Their whole material lives were completely gutted. Just burnt out, fire and gunpowder. So we got the benefit then of what became known as the Hare Krishna explosion. There was a newspaper that they were producing in Hyderabad in the 75, 76, the Hare Krishna explosion. And Hayagriva also, he called his first book the Hare Krishna explosion. And that's what it was. It was a phenomena. And nobody could, understand how it was going on. It just spread in a couple of years all over the planet. And now, of course, we have, somebody gave a list of centers. We have something like 602 ISKCON centers. I was speaking with Muni Maharaj from the Chaitanya Gaudiya Mat a few weeks ago. He's one of our neighbors in Calcutta. And he asked, we were just chit-chatting, and he was telling me some of his pastimes with his guru. And then he asked me, he said, actually, how many centers does ISKCON have? I said, well, at least 600. I mean, they're pretty active preaching, but that, figure really I could see was inconceivable to him. And it's increasing more and more, more and more. Prabhupada, when he went to America, he saw in Butler that there was practically a church on every street corner, every block. Even you go to a place like Alachua. How many churches are there in Alachua? Every couple of blocks there's another church, another church. So that's what Prabhupada wanted for ISKCON. Unlimited numbers of centers where people can come and learn, the genuine science of love of Godhead. So we're coming in, we're here. Now, most of Prabhupada's disciples are coming around about the age that Prabhupada was when he began, and we're, finishing. We're feeling finished. There was a meeting of the American Academy of Religions some years back. I wasn't there, but I heard about it. And our devotees generally go there. I think it's held every November. One professor, he got up and he said, you Hare Krishna devotees, you don't appreciate what your spiritual master did for you. So they were a little surprised. If anybody appreciated what Prabhupada did, of course it was his own followers. We were some of the few that really recognized it, at least to some degree. But then he qualified it and he said, and you won't appreciate what he did for you until you're 70 years old. Then you might understand what he's done. So that was Prabhupada. I mean, just at the fag end of life, when everybody's, hankering for retirement, you've had your whole life, you've filled up, you're finished. Your body's not cooperating anymore, your mind gives you so many problems. And you just want to retire and retreat from everything. At that point, that was when Prabhupada began. Not exactly began, because the beginning was already there, as Satsvarup Maharaj said, a lifetime in preparation. But beginning a worldwide movement at 70 years old is just ridiculous. And not only that, I mean, the task that Prabhupada took on, it would have been daunting even for a fit and healthy person. If we look at the writing of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada began translating 18,000 verses, 12 cantos, when he was about 64. He sat down. He had first of all he was writing longhand. Then he got a typewriter, manual typewriter. And that was his stated mission. He was going to produce the Srimad Bhagavatam in 60 volumes. It took him 4 years to do the first canto, from 61 to 64. And that means that if it had worked at the same rate, the other 11 cantos, that's another 44 years. 4 years per canto. That means Prabhupada would have been about 115 years old by the time that he finished just working on the Bhagavatam, and he was working on it full time at that point. So what to speak about, having time for anything else? Just even the idea of producing the Bhagavatam in 60 volumes was an impossible, it was beyond people's imagination. And in the second volume of the first canto, Prabhupada mentions that one of his friends had, questioned, the viability of what he was doing. And Prabhupada's, it was like an impossible thing. And Prabhupada's reply was that on the heavenly planets, there's hundreds and thousands of volumes of the Bhagavatam. So just trying to do a few, 12 cantos here on this planet is no big deal. Krishna's unlimited, and you can write volumes and volumes about him every day. So from Prabhupada's transcendental perspective, it was no big deal to attempt what other people were thinking was, just crazy. Who would do that? And then on top of that, then he takes up the task of spreading, creating an organization that's going worldwide. So either one of those tasks, would be too much for an ordinary person. But Prabhupada was able to do all of this and more. I mean, you look at his literary output, not just the Bhagavatam, but then he did the entire Chaitanya Charitamrita in 18 months, as well as doing the Bhagavatam and writing, the summary study, Krishna, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, Nectar of Devotion. So many books were coming out, and at the same time traveling like crazy all over the world, preaching every day. Huh? Oh, it is? All right. Today is the day he finished the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So, we were in Toronto, actually, in June of 76. Some professors came to see Prabhupada, and one of them, he'd just come across, or he'd just heard about the Chaitanya Charitamrita had just come out the year before. Because our devotees were traveling all over the country. Satsvarup Maharaj was in charge of what was called the library party. And they were traveling all over and, selling standing orders. That means all the books that Prabhupada had written so far and all the ones that were yet to come were put on order. So they just were amazed. And this professor asked Srila Prabhupada, where did you find the time to write so many books? And Prabhupada said, well, I just sleep for 2 or 3 hours. I get up in the middle of the night, and little drops of water wear away the stone. That was his reply. And there was a Professor Dimmock. I saw this in the showcase there. There's one of the original Penguin editions, the purple and with the black form of Lord Vishnu on it, that first Bhagavad Gita. So he wrote a foreword that was included in that first edition of the Gita. So Dimmock was considered to be the leading authority on Chaitanya Vaishnavism in America, at least amongst any of the Western scholars. Because at the same time he was a complete debauchee, he was a drunkard and who knows what else. But he was the authority. So his, is it the magnum opus? His life's work was translating the Chaitanya Charitamrita into English. No commentaries, just the translation. And he'd been working on it for years. And then one day, the devotees walk into his office, the library party devotees, and they showed him here. Chaitanya Charitamrita in 17 volumes, color illustrations, translation, word for word, purports. And they said he practically had a heart attack. It's like his whole life's mission was completely blown by Srila Prabhupada in 18 months. And Prabhupada's producing the Bhagavatam and, creating a worldwide movement. So, what Prabhupada did was absolutely extraordinary. I don't think we'll ever be able to truly conceive of what he was doing and who he was. And all the effort that had to go into creating this ISKCON movement. It was truly superhuman. And Prabhupada himself said that actually once or twice. There's a little leaflet that's also in one of the showcases there that he took with him when he went to the West. And he mentions there that he's producing it in 60 volumes. So just before Prabhupada left, he put out a little advertisement to be carried in the newspapers, just saying that he was now just about to leave India and preach Lord Chaitanya's message all around the world, and that this sloka of Lord Chaitanya's, Prachivichay Chaitanya Nagaradigram Savatra Prachahoi Bay Mornam, he said, this is now going to be fulfilled. It says that in the newspaper article. And in the article, he mentions that before anybody in India had a chance to appreciate this work that he was doing in translating the Srimad Bhagavatam, some people in America had already appreciated it and requested, that he come and teach them. And he mentions this, that it was a superhuman effort, to produce this. So, of course, at that time, Prabhupada, who did he know in America? He'd never met anybody in America before, but he said the Americans were inviting him. It's kind of interesting because when Prabhupada arrived in America, it was to discover that his Bhagavatam had already got there before him. He had gotten a distributor in Delhi, and when the first 3 volumes came out, he got this book distributor to sell his books, and they had sold 17 or 18 sets to the American embassy. And they immediately shipped them out to different educational institutions in America. So when Prabhupada arrived, he had spent, 3 weeks in Butler, and then he decided to go and try, a new preaching field in New York. So on the way up, he dropped off at, I think, the University of Pennsylvania. There was some professor that he'd met, and he had invited him to come and speak at the university. So when Prabhupada went there after speaking, he went to the library to sell his books, because that, of course, was the only means that he had for supporting himself at that time also. And when they saw them, they said, "Oh, but we've already got these." So Prabhupada's books had already got to America before him. So I think that's quite significant. Same as when he arrived in San Francisco, Lord Jagannath was already there, waiting for him to, be revealed by his pure devotee. So, we can go on. There's lots of examples that we can give to show how Srila Prabhupada was such a extraordinary personality. But what I'm going to do now is throw things open for questions and answers. Yeah. So if anybody has comments or, wants to ask something in particular, please go ahead.
Pass the microphone over.
It's
Prabhu, you spoke about Srila Prabhupada's relationship with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Is it true that he, at least on one occasion, sat on the same level with Bhaktisiddhanta? Do you know?
Yes, apparently he did. I was under the impression that it was the first time that they met at the house at Ultadingi Road Junction. We actually own that house also. The devotees purchased it about 4 or 5 years ago. So that's going to be fixed up eventually as like a museum or something. But apparently it wasn't there. It was more likely that he did that when he came to see Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati in Koshi.
That was my understanding.
Yeah, he had come in Koshi. What was that? 1932 or something, I think. I have to check that date. But yeah, Prabhupada said that he was thinking, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's a gentleman. I'm also a gentleman. So, you know, it's a natural thing to sit there. And then when he sat down, then he realized everybody else was sitting on the ground. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati came. He didn't say anything. But Prabhupada realized he'd made a mistake. And then he got down and sat down on the ground. So, you know, the relationship at that point was just beginning to develop. And that visit to Koshi was very short. He got there, I think, just on the last day when the Parikrama party, they had that choice to stay and listen to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati give a lecture, or they could go to Sheshashayi on the Parikrama. And most of them actually went on the Parikrama. But Prabhupada decided to stay. He'd come to see his spiritual master. And he said that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had noted that this boy likes to hear. You know, he's not gone on the Parikrama, he's preferred to stay and hear. And Prabhupada said at that time, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's language, you know, was so sophisticated that he could hardly understand anything that he was saying. But still he heard. And then, of course, later on that matured. But that was... The following year was when he got initiated in Allahabad at the opening of the temple there. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, when he was introduced to Prabhupada, he said, yes, I've marked him. He likes to hear. So Prabhupada had some good qualifications there. Another question? Anybody? Yes. We have a microphone.
Prabhuji, I noticed how Srila Prabhupada used to always teach us lessons in everything he said and did. There are so many little lessons I remember. And so I wanted to know if you can, if someone asked you, what's a lesson that Srila Prabhupada taught you, what would come to your mind first?
Well, probably the thing that's the hardest to do, which is being humble. When I joined Prabhupada's party, it was at the end of 75. Again, that's 40 years ago. And he had come to Delhi. And at that time, for some reason or another, there were at least 4 former personal servants that were in India, but none of them were available. And when Prabhupada came up to Delhi, he came with just Hari Kesh, and Hansaduta flew in from Europe to be his secretary for that month. That was late November. And there was nobody available to give him his massage. Upendra had been here, and so had Nitai. They had, you know, let's see, I'll backtrack a little bit so you get the sequence. Prabhupada, after the opening of the temple, his first visit back to Vrindavan to see how everything was going on, that was for Janmashtami and Radhastami of 1975. So when he came, he had quite a big party. Brahmananda was the secretary. He had Upendra, he had Nitai, and Hari Kesh. When he left, Upendra stayed behind, and so did Nitai. Upendra was supposed to go to Fiji, and he was waiting for a ticket to come from Fiji. And then Nitai Das, he wanted to stay and help develop the deity puja, and also the Gurukul, which was just beginning. So Prabhupada went down to Bombay. Navi Yogendra had flown over from Africa. Parvati, I think you were in Africa at that time. And there were, you know, it was quite a disturbed scene there. So Prabhupada went to Africa, he went to Kenya, he went to South Africa, and I think he went to Mauritius. And when he saw the problems that were there, then he instructed his GBC, Brahmananda, that he had to go back to Africa and sort everything out. So when Prabhupada came back to Bombay in early November, I think it was, then he gave sannyas to Navayogendra, and there was another personal servant, Nanda Kumar. He was the first personal servant that I ever saw when Prabhupada came to Sydney in 1972. He was on the party. So Nanda Kumar was kind of in India and doing some business. And he went to see Prabhupada, and Prabhupada asked him, "What are you doing?" He explained he was doing this business selling herbs. And so when Prabhupada heard that, he said, "If you do this business, you'll go to hell." So that shocked Nanda Kumar so much that he asked Prabhupada, "Well, what should I do?" Prabhupada said, "Take sannyas." So it was an attempt to save him, actually. And so the two of them, Navayogendra and Nanda Kumar, were given sannyas, and they were sent with Brahmananda back to Africa. So when Prabhupada left Bombay, he came up to Delhi. There was Upendra and there was Nitai, still here in Vrindavan. But Upendra had just received his ticket to go to Fiji, so he wasn't going to stay for more than a day or two. And Nitai had a problem with his visa. He had to get an extension, and he had, I think, registered in Bombay, so he had to leave here and go down to Bombay. So Prabhupada arrived on the 25th of November, and somehow or another, although these 4 former personal servants were in India, none of them were available. It was a very unusual situation. And so Hansadutta, he came in to replace Brahmananda as the secretary, but there was nobody to do, at least the massage. Harikesh was filling in to do, the general servant's duties as well as his own. He was the cook, and he was transcribing Prabhupada's Bhagavatam dictations every day. So he was quite busy. Anyway, somehow or another, I just happened to be in Delhi for the day, actually. I'd gone in on some private business. And I'll always be grateful to Gopal Krishna Maharaj, because he was the GBC at that time, because he was a Grihastha at that time. He saw me there in Delhi, and he took me to one side and told me, "No, I don't want you to go back to Vrindavan. I want you to stay in Delhi for the next few days and be Prabhupada's door guard." And at the time I was thinking, door guard? Why does Prabhupada need a door guard in Delhi? If it was in America maybe, but But I was very happy that, all right, I can stay for a few days. Prabhupada was due to spend 3 or 4 days there, and then he was going to go to Kurukshetra, and then he was going to come here to Vrindavan. So I was told, you stay in Delhi and be Prabhupada's door guard. So then I did 1 day on that. Then the next day I was in the temple that was at Toddamal Lane in Bengali markets. Do you ever go there? Yeah, tiny, tiny little place. I mean, the whole thing was about as big as this room. And Prabhupada was staying in the flat just further down the road. So I'd gone down to chant in front of the deities, and then Harikesh stuck his head through the door. And he had those very thick, Coke bottle lenses in his glasses, made his eyes look really big. And he kind of gave me the stare. And he asked me, do you know how to massage? So I said, no, I've never done it in my life. So he said, Upendra's massaging Prabhupada today, but he's leaving tomorrow, and we need somebody to massage him, so you're it. And that was it. So, of course, I didn't argue. I ran down the road as fast as I could. I couldn't believe what was happening. And I ran up 3 flights of stairs, came out on the roof, and sure enough, there was Srila Prabhupada sitting on the mat. Upendra was massaging him, and I thought, wow, this is really happening. It's like you're in a state of suspended disbelief, So I sat down, and I offered my obeisances. I sat down and started watching, and then after about a minute, Prabhupada's eyes were closed, actually. So then after about a minute, he opened his eyes, and he saw me sitting there. And he said, what is that? And the way that he said it, I thought, maybe I misunderstood something here, So I repeated what Harikesh had told me, And then Prabhupada just, all right. And then he closed his eyes and that was it. So I sat there for an hour and watched Upendra massage. And then Prabhupada went downstairs to take his bath. Upendra took literally 2 minutes to explain to me how to do a massage. And that was it. Then he told me, come back in the night time at 9 o'clock because Prabhupada has an evening massage as well. I didn't even know that Prabhupada had an evening massage. We all knew about the midday one, but the evening one was done, of course, in his bedroom, so only the servants knew about that. So I reported in the evening, and then after the darshan, everybody left. Prabhupada had a little snack, and then he went to take rest. So Upendra signaled to me, come on, I'll show you how to do the massage. So that was how I got onto the party, at least temporarily anyway. It was supposed to be like a 3 or 4 day engagement. And Harikesh, was very strict that don't think you're Prabhupada's servant, you're only here just to do the massage. When Prabhupada gets back down to Bombay, Nitai's going to come back on the party. When he goes to Vrindavan, I've already arranged for somebody else to take over doing the massage. Don't get attached. So I accepted that. I was just really grateful to get the opportunity. Anyway, to come to the point of the story, the first evening that I went into Prabhupada's rooms, it was like a whole nother world. Our experience of Prabhupada was very formal. Seeing him on the Vyasasan giving a class. If you were lucky, you might get out on a morning walk if Prabhupada visited your temple, maybe one time. But it was, a very formal kind of situation. And even darshans in his rooms, Prabhupada was preaching. So again, it was very formal. But in the night time, after the darshan finished, Prabhupada was much more relaxed. He was chit-chatting with Hansadutta. Upendra was in and out. And Harikesh had cooked something for Prabhupada. And Prabhupada had just finished eating when I came in. So after he finished, he told me, now take this plate and wash it. And underneath his desk, somebody had given a basket of fruit. So he said, take this fruit and give it to the temple for offering to the deities. So I, in my eagerness, I grabbed hold of Prabhupada's plate. I was feeling like I was getting purified, just touching the plate that Prabhupada had eaten from. And with the other hand, I grabbed the basket of fruit. And Prabhupada immediately stopped me, you malacha, you're touching the plate which, is contaminated. I've just eaten from that. And now you're touching the fruit that has to be offered to the deity. So I said, put them down, go and wash your hands, wash the plate first. After you've done that, then take the fruit. So, that was my first little offense, if you like. And then a couple of nights later, the same thing happened again, but this time it was a jug of water. And I touched Prabhupada's plate, and then I got the jug of water to pour it out. Prabhupada again stopped me. So like that, I immediately realized that if I'm going to be this close to Prabhupada, I'm going to commit a lot of offenses. I couldn't see any way around it. So I had two choices. One of them was to just not get that close. Then you don't commit any offenses. You keep it a distance. Or the other one is if you want to do the service, then you just have to be very, very humble because you're going to make offenses. And the only protection, I understood it immediately, the only protection that I had against making offenses was, to be very humble and learn from them. So, Prabhupada would chastise you, but you're expected to learn from that. And if you did learn your lesson, then he would never mention it again. But if you didn't and you repeated the same offense again, then he would get really annoyed. So that was the first thing I think that I learned. It was just, humility is everything in spiritual service. There was no way that you could come close to Srila Prabhupada and not commit some offense or another. Yeah, if you were with him for an extended period, either just, by inattention or just stupidity or whatever it was, but you were going to do it. So that was the protection that we had, against having to suffer horrendous, reactions for our sinful activities or offensive behavior, was just to be very, very humble and learn your lesson. So that, the little things like that. That was the first one. Any other questions? Maharaj, will you get the microphone over there?
Srila Prabhupada talked very much with you. Were you privy to any of his...
Wait for the microphone, Maharaj, because it's been broadcast.
Were you privy to any of Srila Prabhupada's discussions about Advaitacharya and his beard? Because you're probably aware there's a controversy,
Yes.
And my understanding is that we go with Srila Prabhupada regardless, because we can't jump over.
Yes.
We can't jump over to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, but there are some who allege that there was a difference of opinion with Srila Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, a very sensitive subject matter. But my understanding is that we can't jump over.
Right.
We go with Srila Prabhupada. It's a rope, it's a snake,
Well, it's one of those ongoing things in ISKCON. They get a life of their own. They get recirculated every few years. Different people jump in on the
yes,
debate.
I know it's ongoing. So the thing is that...
Personally, I never heard Prabhupada talk about it.
He gave specific instructions to his artists, however, that Dvaitacharya should have a beard.
Yes.
To the artist, he gave specific instructions, and that's why in all our paintings he has a beard, because
Yes.
he directly instructed the artist to depict him like that.
Yeah, I mean, at least from the few references that I've seen, it's very clear that Prabhupada said that Advaita Acharya had a beard. Interestingly enough, there's a Madan Gopal temple at the top of Loy Bazaar, which is in the Nityananda Vamsa. Advaita Vamsa, sorry, not Nityananda, Advaita Vamsa. They have a deity of Advaita. They're coming in direct line from him, and he's got a beard. And as far as I can understand, and I might be corrected on this, the objection that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had in depicting him with a beard was because at that time the bowls were very prominent in Bengal. The owls, the bowls, and they all had big bushy beards. So to distinguish Advaita Chandra, he didn't want to depict him in such a way that he might be mistaken that he's a bowl. So he instructed his disciples not to give him a beard. But
That's
when
good enough for me, because it comes up on Facebook. I had
everything comes up on Facebook.
So I thank you, because then I have an answer to fire back at those who dare to criticize Srila Prabhupada.
Well, there is also, last year, from the same source, I got a photograph of a painting that was said to have been done by the personal servant of Advaita Acharya, and it shows him with the beard.
With beard.
Yes.
Painting
So
by his personal servant?
yes. I forget his name now, but I can look it up.
They claim there are other paintings showing him without beard.
Well, maybe. I don't know.
Anyways, my point is that so we can't jump over, It doesn't matter how much evidence they bring forward of, ancient paintings or whatever, we have to go with Prabhupada regardless.
Yes.
That's my understanding,
Yeah, that's all we need to know.
Not jumping over,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Now they've got a picture of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati.
Speak in the microphone. Practice what you
now
preach.
They have this, in the Radha Damodar, they put a new picture of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati with a huge beard. So
Well,
we're used to seeing him completely clean shaven.
yeah, but in the Chaturmasya period, it was traditional. He did grow his
Maybe this
beard
is the
out.
Chaturmasya photograph.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then after Chaturmasya, maybe they go back to the other photograph.
Yeah, well, you see in the Gaudiya mat, even now, most of them, they grow their beards during Chaturmasya. Prabhupada didn't like beards, actually. He may have also had an objection to having a beard. I mean, the thing about the bowls and not wanting to confuse Advaita with the bowls, and therefore him not having a beard, and then Prabhupada saying that he should have a beard. But then again, conversely, Prabhupada didn't like his disciples having beards because of the hippies. So, Hayagriva had a big bushy beard. Even after he got initiated and he shaved his head, he still had a beard. And I remember Madhudvisa also telling me that when he joined up, he was kind of attached to his beard, so he shaved his head, but he still had a beard. Later on, he shaved it off. But there's a letter from Prabhupada to Hayagriva, might be 67 or something around that time, where Hayagriva just informed him that he'd finally shaved off his beard. And Prabhupada wrote back and said, "I'm glad that you've got rid of this Maya." So, time, place, and circumstance. Prabhupada, you'll see, was always clean-shaven. Always. Although as a Grihastha he had a mustache, but he said after he got initiated, he was always clean-shaven. Because I met one devotee, he'd grown a big mustache, and I was, kind of a bit critical of that. And he said, no, Prabhupada had a mustache. Then I found this letter where Prabhupada said that after initiation I was always clean-shaven. So I was able to, yeah.
You spoke of the Hare Krishna explosion just a short time back.
Yeah.
And in Manipal, when you came, you gave a wonderful talk, and you explained the verse Sadhu Sangha Sarva Shastra Hoy, Lava Matra. Can you just share that with maybe the devotees haven't all heard it? It was really nice.
Yeah, well, that principle of one moment's association, we just read the fire and gunpowder, a brilliant example. So just in terms of that verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and especially that lava matra, 1/11th of a second is all you need, for your whole spiritual life to begin. So it was a little difficult to understand what that really meant. When the CC came out complete in 75, because we read that and it became another topic of discussion. It would probably be on Facebook now if it was nowadays, but it was another topic of discussion. And so it came up in Mayapur in March of 76 at the festival, and Pancha Dravida Maharaj asked Prabhupada, what does that actually mean, that 1/11th of a second? Because, an 11th of a second, what does that mean? That Prabhupada just walked past and you happen to just glance, for less than a second, and now you're going back to Godhead? How does it work? 1/11th of a second, and you can become completely perfect. So Prabhupada explained that it's actually, a reciprocation. It's a two-way street. The spiritual master, he has to be perfect, but the disciple also has to be serious in himself. Then there's a reaction. If you throw, he gave the example of the fire. So if you have dry wood, when the fire hits the dry wood, fire and gunpowder, there's an immediate reaction. But if the wood is wet, then even your fire is good, but the wood will take some time to dry out. So in that way, he explained that it's not just a question of the Guru being perfect, but the disciple also has to be very serious, and then there'll be a reaction. And if the disciple's not serious, it doesn't matter, how powerful the fire is. That wetness will still be there, wetness of material contact. So, yeah, that's an interesting conversation. That was as far as I remember, the last morning walk that Vishnu Jan Swami was on, and. Maybe not that one. No, it was a different one. But anyway, it was around about the same period when Vishnu Jan Maharaj disappeared, and there was that whole discussion about committing suicide, what does that really mean? And Prabhupada made some really heavy comments about that. But yeah, 1/11th of a second, it works if there's the right conditions. But it's a reciprocation. It's not just a one-way street that Krishna can just magically wave his wand or throw some ash. We were, Gagamuni is just outside there. We were in Jagannath Puri and Bhubaneswar in 1977. And Prabhupada was talking about bogus gurus, and so he said, you are the mentality of these people. Prabhupada was explaining about how you have to be just tolerant of everything, and he gave us his own example that he suffered these heart attacks, but despite those heart attacks, Haituki Apratiyata, he was uninterrupted in doing his service, and that's an example of pure devotional service. So now I'm losing my track. What was I saying? No, we were in Bhubaneswar. I've lost my track on the point that I was going to make now.
It's not a one-way street.
Yeah, all right. Sorry. It's one of the problems of growing old. No. All right, we'll have to backtrack on that one. No, something to do with... Yeah, Gagamuni was there. I've lost my track now. Sorry, I'll have to come back to that one. It's one of the problems that I have nowadays. Sometimes I'm talking and then I lose the thread of what I was saying. Yeah, well, it didn't used to happen to me, but now it is. So it may come back. Let's have another question. Yes, Mataji, sorry.
It seems that you have endeared yourself to Srila Prabhupada because, from what I've heard from your previous talks, excuse me, and actually a conversation that I had with some other devotees years ago with Harikesh, and he admitted that Srila Prabhupada really loved the way that you were so willing to listen to him. And he loved that exchange that he had with you, that he had a real companion, that someone that he could talk to and reminisce with. And Harikesh admitted that he was like too hyper, just too, passionate, and was never able to really be that for Srila Prabhupada. But you, however, were able to be that wonderful companion that Srila Prabhupada really loved. And I was just wanting to know how you came to know that was kind of the missing thing out of all of Srila Prabhupada's companions.
Well, I wouldn't agree with, first of all, I wouldn't agree with Harikesh. Prabhupada had so many disciples that he had very intimate relationships with. I'll give an example. I left the party in March of 1977. And the reason why I did that was because I knew my time was up, and I also knew that Prabhupada was changing his Leela. I actually wrote it in my diary at the time that I thought, Prabhupada had been getting very sick, he was getting weaker and weaker, and then when we got to Mayapur, of course, he had a complete breakdown just at the beginning of the festival. But just before that, Tamal Krishna Maharaj had come in as the visiting secretary. And just after he arrived, we had a little chat. And he told me that he had decided to ask Srila Prabhupada if he could now give up his preaching work and come on and be Prabhupada's secretary permanently. And he told me that, he'd spent 8 years out preaching because he thought that was more important. Prabhupada always wanted that. But now he was feeling a real need personally to just be with Srila Prabhupada. And he said, I want to stay with him as long as he's, whatever time he's got left on the planet, whether it's 1 year or 10 years, but I feel a real need for that. Conversely for me, I just had 1.5 years, and I was thinking that now my time was coming to an end and that I should use what I'd learnt from Prabhupada and go out and preach. So it was kind of like the reverse order. My feeling was that Prabhupada was changing his Leela. Nirjana Bhajani was moving into retirement from preaching. And that that Krishna was sending more mature and qualified devotees to look after him because I couldn't do that level of service. And that's really the way it worked. I mean, Tamal Krishna Maharaj's relationship with Prabhupada was amazing. I came back, I left the party in March. Prabhupada sent me back to Australia and made me the GBC there. Then, of course, he came back after being in Rishikesh in May. It seemed like he was going to leave. All the GBCs were called, so we all flew in. I stayed for a couple of weeks through early June. And what I saw was a level of intimacy between Prabhupada and Tamal Krishna Maharaj that I hadn't seen before with anybody. The way that he was, talking to him, the exchanges that they had. Prabhupada put his life entirely in Tamal's hands, and he was very, very happy with him. So it was, it was a level of devotion and reciprocation with Prabhupada that I was too new a neophyte to understand. I was too immature. But Tamal was really, that was, his ultimate service was just taking care of Prabhupada. So I wouldn't agree with Harikesh, at least in some of the things that you just said there. Harikesh, his relationship with Prabhupada, it's a fact. He was a bit fractious. He was super intelligent, but sometimes over-intelligent. And Prabhupada had to keep bashing him on the head sometimes just to, direct that kinetic energy that he had in a constructive way. But, Prabhupada... One devotee told me after I'd been on the party for about a year that Smarahari, he's a good friend of mine, he had been in the Vrindavan temple when I first joined the party. So after about a year we were back here, and he said, I think you're one of Prabhupada's favorites. So I said, Prabhupada doesn't have favorites. He's transcendental, he has the same feeling for all of his disciples. And it's up to us to take advantage of it. So I think that it works that way rather than, somebody having a special relationship. I think that it depends on, service rendered. People like Brahmananda, Sarabi, you hear their stories, these amazing stories, what they did for Prabhupada. And Prabhupada really, really appreciated that. So, somebody just doing a bit of personal service, that's fine. But the real essence, the relationship with Prabhupada was translating what you learnt from him into some preaching activity. That then really deepened the relationship. So Tamal had spent that 8 years, really going out there, powerfully spreading Krishna consciousness. And when he came back, Prabhupada just placed himself in his entire life in his hands. So I don't know whether that's my perspective at least anyway. Any other questions or comments? I still can't remember that Bhubaneswar, the point that I was going to make in Bhubaneswar. It's gone, I'm blanked. Other questions, anybody? Yeah. Shruti Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. So when Tamal Krishna Maharaj came to take care of Prabhupada, it was more intense because Prabhupada's health was much more deteriorated. It was more intense,
yes.
and more difficult to do.
Much more difficult. yeah, Prabhupada became incapacitated, basically. When we were in Mayapur in '77, just at the beginning of the festival, Prabhupada got seriously ill. He had a very high fever. He attended the first day of the festival, and then when he came back up into his rooms, he said, "No more visitors. I don't want to see anybody." And for 6 days, he was just, laid out. I mean, sometimes he was sleeping on the mat on the floor. Sometimes he was sleeping on the bed. Navi Yogendra was sleeping on the floor next to him just in case there was any emergency. We had to change the whole routine that Prabhupada had been, practicing for years because of his illness. And he very nearly left his body at that time. So when Tamal came on, it was just at that moment when Prabhupada, irrevocably became weak and ill. And it wasn't going to get any better after that. It didn't, obviously. So when Prabhupada came to Bombay at the end of the festival, first of all, he didn't attend most of the festival in Mayapur. Then when that leg of the festival ended, everybody came to Vrindavan. Prabhupada didn't come to Vrindavan because he was too sick. And I left the party at that time. I also came over to Vrindavan. Then I got a call from Tamal saying that Prabhupada's going to Bombay. They'd arranged a big pandal there. Aditi, you might have been there. Remember that one? Krishna consciousness, what was it? Modern civilization is a disaster or something. Krishna consciousness is the only hope. So there was like a whole pandal that had been arranged there. And then it looked like Prabhupada wouldn't be able to attend. And then just at the last second, somehow or another, they got on the plane and they flew into Bombay. Myself and Giriraj went out to the airport. That was the old Palam airport, little rinky-dink, set up there. And we were waiting. We brought Prabhupada's car, and the car drove out. They allowed the car to drive out to the aeroplane. It was parked on the taxiway there. And we were watching. All the people got off the plane, and there's no sign of Prabhupada. And then one of these catering vans, the ones with the hydraulic boxes on the back, they lift all the trolleys up level with the aeroplane and wheel them on, and then the thing comes down again. So the catering van went out, and then the box went up, and then after about a minute it came straight back down again, and then we saw Prabhupada being carried out of the back of this truck, by the devotees and put in the car. Then they drove off the airfield. We were just at the entrance to the airfield. There was like a wire gate. So when that opened, Prabhupada saw myself and Giriraj, and he called us. He stopped the car and called us, get in, get in. So we jumped in the car, and then we drove off to Bombay, to Juhu Beach. And Prabhupada told us, he said even up until last night, there was